when I got to St. John's, and I was like, oh, I'm a music director without a degree, and the past music directors before me, they know how to sing, they know how to conduct, they know how to play different instruments, they know how to play pipe organ on a professional level. And I felt excited. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in this position, and the previous people before me had these skills, which probably means that folks have some level of confidence that I can, at some point down the line, pick them up. And so that's what I tried doing.
Hey everyone, this is Arabella from Arabella's Studio, back for another episode of In My Musical Opinion. This time I'm joined by Harrison Lee. Hey Harrison.
Hello.
I'm really excited for this one. I say that every time, but I always am. But I'm especially excited for this one. And my goal today is to do less talking and more listening, because Harrison just has so much to share with us. Before we jumped on the podcast, I was like, what are we going to talk about? Because there's so many topics that we could talk about. And
Right.
I think we narrowed it down to some good ones, and I hope our listeners will agree. But Harrison, can you just start with telling us a little bit about who you are and what your musical background is?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Harrison Lee, and I'm a musician here in the Boston area. And so I'm a content creator, and I also am the music director and choir director over at St. John's Episcopal Church in Jamaica Plain. And I also teach piano as well. My background is very interesting, and I'm sure throughout this time speaking with Arabella that I'll be able to describe a little bit more of my chaotic adventure. But I play a few instruments, and my primary instrument is piano. And I also do play violin, and recently I picked up pipe organ and I started singing as well. And so, yeah, it's been a fun journey.
That's awesome. So much already to unpack there. But can you give us a little bit of insight on how you got into music?
Yeah, and so this is where this might sound different for people, and while I did start piano lessons when I was around 6, the way it happened was actually quite interesting. So I started at a local piano store, and within the first few lessons, my piano teacher at the time was sort of just surprised and wasn't sure exactly what to do at first, because within the first few lessons, once I figured out the notes on the staff, and then I would write down the letters of the notes onto the scores and everything. And once I translated it onto what the notes were on the keyboard, I would just pluck them out and I would memorize them. And that's how I would just teach myself classical pieces. So I would come to lessons, and my teacher would be like, what? But the only issue would be like maybe I played it too slow or I rushed through it, like stuff like that. But I did not learn what a scale or chord or any music theory until I was around 24 when I got to Berkeley. And so my teacher ultimately ended up becoming more of like a loose guide. And this is what I ended up needing most. And I didn't realize this until later in life. But when I was 7, she had this conversation with my father. I was next to her at the time, and she said, I cannot teach him. And so I recommend that he studies with like a piano professor over at Rutgers, which was the university that I would later graduate from with a biology degree. But at the time, this was like a crossroads, right? And of course, as a 7-year-old, I had not much of a choice. But the ultimate decision was to not pursue that route of going with the professor. And at the time, I felt a little devastated, but it ultimately became what I needed in order to really spread my wings and grow, because that piano teacher, despite the limitations that she thought she had or recognized that she had, um, was what I needed, because then I could like just feel out the music that made the most sense to me and discover the sounds that felt great to me, and kind of internalize it into my own musical vocabulary, and on my own terms. Like, that was the most important thing for my learning. And so, yeah, it's been quite the journey since.
Yeah, I would maybe argue that the best teachers, period, are just loose guides. Um, I guess that's open to debate, but I know for myself as a teacher, I sometimes do best when I get out of the way and say, "Well, you show me," and then I'll intervene a little bit, but you show me what you can do, and
Right.
I end up being the student a lot of the times just because everyone brings something new to the table and a new way of thinking about it, and I enjoy that aspect. That might have seemed like a casual question to our listeners, but actually, Harrison has done some TEDx style interviews about this very topic, about his musical background. So if you're interested in going even deeper into what made Harrison the musician he is today, we'd love to share those with you. He also does concerts around the Boston area that are TEDx styles, where he sort of weaves his story into the pieces that he's doing. So if you're in the Boston area, I'm sure there'll be more information to come on that.
And Arabella has been to them personally, so she can attest to that.
Something I really enjoy about your concerts is, and you've said this, I actually just saw an Instagram post that you did on this where it was
Really? Okay.
where you said, "I'm a classical musician, but improv is my favorite." And that is like a core component of Harrison's work. And at this point, I don't know that I can say that I'm doing classical style music, but it was like a first musical love of mine, and
Hmm.
been a sticking point for me where I'm like, it's not as structured as people think. There is creativity there.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about like musical creativity in terms of different interpretations of the same combination of notes or the same exact arrangement that the original composer created. To me, improvisation helps create further context for the musical minds of, the historical figures that we looked up to. And many of them were huge and master improvisers. And we like to think of Bach and Beethoven, and we associate a level of, I wouldn't say rigidity, but there is a certain level of standard expectation of how something should be played or interpreted. Uh, and then when I started composing myself and creating music with improvisation and looking further into the mind of a composer and studying more on how Mozart created his music or how Bach would improvise whole like chorales and do stuff like that for church every Sunday, which is crazy to think about. And, and wrote music for all his kids. But this is the thing, like, I bet that most of these composers, they write their music, and since a lot of it is improv based, they likely never play it the exact same way themselves, and they probably standardize a certain score for the masses, and so for people to learn and enjoy on their own. But as a performer and as the artist, and at least me personally, I can't speak to them, but I like to vary my own stuff. And as an artist, I really value and appreciate when others take my ideas and still hold on to the core heart and essence of it, but still take it to different and new and greater heights that I may not have initially thought of. I think that's some of the most exciting parts of being a musician. So, and getting to share your stuff with the world. So,
I agree.
yeah.
And I think it's one of the most exciting parts of your shows. So
Oh, I
I'm glad that
appreciate that.
that's the approach you take. This episode is sponsored by ABS. Together, we are redefining what it means to be a musical community. Rather than a single central studio, our presence is woven into the fabric of our city. You'll find us in boutique practice rooms strategically placed at the heart of the action from Rock City, Alston to across from the Symphony in Back Bay. We gather in local pubs, breweries, at local open mics, channeling our resources into getting singers out of the practice room and onto stages in the greater Boston area. Let's talk about that creativity piece for a second. Do you think And for those who don't know, Harrison, what is your handle for Instagram, or where can people find you?
Uh, so my Instagram handle, as of right now, and has been for a while, is Harrison Piano. Quite predictable. I'm considering maybe changing that, the ending of that, because I don't just play piano, but
Sure.
I think there's a catch to it for the meantime. So
Yeah.
Harrison Piano, no spaces, no underscore. Yeah.
We'll get to that part in a second because I have some
Yeah,
questions on that too. But
sure.
quite the following now. Do you know how many followers you're up to at the moment?
I'm currently at 20, 25.3 K. So that's on Instagram, and I'm very grateful for that community that I have on there, and it only happened really because of my move to Boston and pursuing music and doing this MIT movement study that was really exciting, where they put sensors all over my body, and it was like this whole health study where they wanted to compare pianists who were prone to injury or pianists who were more resistant to injury, and I was on the latter group, and it was fun, and that was how I gained a lot of my current community, and that was in 2023. I remember, and it was a crazy time.
Very cool. Yeah, there's so much there. But my initial question before I kind of got sidetracked there was, do you think that the creativity that you have for the improvisation is also what fuels your social growth on social media?
Yes, and I think I try and weave this into my own. I kind of switch between advocacy and playing like my own music, and also playing other people's music to kind of show people the perspective of what it means to be someone who appreciates the traditional aspects of music, but also embracing the newer and more experimental aspects. And that's what the messaging that I try, and of course, I'm always learning and trying to learn better ways of getting that message across. But the way I approach my composition and improv now definitely influences the way I engage with my audience.
And I know you said that it's been a big source for your community. So a lot of musicians in particular, but I think artists are looking for social media to help grow careers, but also to grow that fan base. And I think that's been your experience with it. What would you tell someone who's looking to go that avenue? Because it sounds like you had this great experience at MIT, and that's kind of what started the fast track growth. But then obviously you've done something to keep that momentum.
And I think that there's a balance to be had with that. I think it's when I went viral in 2023, I was faced with, of course, when your stuff blows up, a lot of things come your way, and some of it is opportunity, and some others is stuff that you may or may not have to spend a little bit extra time thinking about. And that part of that also comes with authenticity, and the people who come your way and the opportunities they extend, how much of them do they align with your values? What kind of image um, do you want to have? What kind of messaging do you want to get to your audience? What kind of brand deals do you want to agree to? Right, like all those things, all factors into maintaining momentum, and of course accepting all these new and exciting opportunities is part of that growth, but also maintaining the authenticity English is, I think, is probably one of the hardest parts, because oftentimes I'm like, I want this, I want to try that, I want to speak to this person, I want this opportunity, and then there's also the kind of the values that I stand for, and the projects and the music that I want to play on my, and things that I want to do on my own terms, and finding the people and the organizations where those visions can come together and fit in very well. And that stuff takes time, and that's what I've had to learn after gaining a following. I hope that answers the question.
No, it definitely does. And something I think is really special about your experience, I hope this is okay to say, but it started from a video that highlighted that we can focus healthily on musicians who've had injuries. So, from
Mhm.
my experience, um, uh, I went to school for vocal disorders, and something that comes up a lot is vocalists don't like to talk about when there's an injury to their voice because there's a little bit of, I don't know what you would call it, but a stigma around
Mm.
it. But in reality, if you're competing at an athletic level, injuries can happen. Of course, we don't want to. No one go a tennis player doesn't go onto the court and say, I hope I twist my ankle today." Like, but when you compete at a high level, then injuries can happen. And what I thought was really authentic, speaking of authenticity to your experience, is here's a video where it was focused on injuries, in this case, the piano, but how can we facilitate healing for that? And then you posted it, or they posted it, and you posted your journey, and that's what blew up. So the you talking about something that authentically happened to you and something that you've overcome is the thing that started the growth.
Yeah, and for me, like I wasn't like the musician who was more injury prone, but I was definitely someone who, being mostly self-taught and was on this whole self-discovery journey, I definitely have had like these habits that as you get to a higher level could cause injury or make you more prone or those little things to be aware of, such as tension, and that happens to a lot of musicians no matter what they do or what they play or
Sure.
um, and and yeah, so that MIT study, even though I was categorized as the more injury resistant, and the past illness and the injuries that I had were more non-playing related, but it did kind of spark this whole idea in me, like, oh, like I should really be more aware of my body, especially as someone who's mostly self-taught, and it has helped me with teaching my students as well and being more cognizant of their bodies and all. So
Oh, that's interesting. So basically the study took groups of people that were um injury resistant and had injuries and looked at the different mechanics. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's super cool. Where can we find more about that resource or research if we're interested, which I am?
So I could provide them to you. They also have they've been doing more of this kind of biomechanics and research, and they've done more studies on this. And I'm actually likely returning back to MIT later this year to do a different study, but still a similar one. And the MIT Immersion Lab is the name of the lab that is conducting these studies. And I'm happy to link their Instagram, and I believe they also have a webpage, so I can provide that.
Oh, awesome. That would be great. Cool. So you mentioned you were going to think of changing your handle because you're not just Harrison Piano, you're really Harrison Piano, vocals, violin. One,
And yeah, like I don't know how I feel about that.
get 'em
And
all, like, get all those keywords in your handle there.
right, just put them all in underscore.
So can you talk a little bit about that? That's been a big discussion point I know between us personally, and I think it's just really useful for others to hear.
Yeah, and I definitely the right environment helps foster that and makes me feel more confident, exploring and extending my arms and trying new instruments. St. John's definitely is the place that I work at and where I direct choir is a huge part in helping me feel comfortable exploring these different instruments. And I was diagnosed late with autism and I didn't know I had some abilities in music. So when I got to St. John's and I was like, oh, I'm a music director without a degree, and the past music directors before me, they know how to sing, they know how to conduct, they know how to play different instruments, they know how to play pipe organ on a professional level. And I just felt, I mean, inadequate isn't the word, but I felt excited.
Mm.
I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in this position, and the previous people before me had these skills, which probably means that folks have some level of confidence that I can, at some point down the line, pick them up. And so that's what I tried doing. And I didn't think it would be possible because I was like, this might take me many, many years to get the reins of, and there's certain things that I'm sure to master might take me many years to master, as it does for everyone. Um, but I think gaining the confidence, working with people who are very kind and embracing of me being neurodivergent and the way I process music, helped provide me the time and the space to just explore and learn on my own terms without feeling the stress of needing to find a mentor right this second or needing to find a teacher, and having faith in my self-taught journey. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
This episode is sponsored by Piano for the Vocalist. Piano for the Vocalist is your ultimate resource for unlocking the skills to self-accompany with confidence. This largely free program is focused on teaching singers to use collaborative piano techniques for vocal performance rather than traditional piano skills, empowering you to accompany yourself with ease. I know I said I would mostly listen today, but if it's okay to interject some of my story too, I think this
of
would be a
course.
place to do it. For some of our past listeners, our students listening, you might know this already, but when we launched Piano for the Vocalist, it was a very similar story to what you just shared with my own flavors in it, right? Piano was actually something I felt a little self-conscious about. It's something I've done for a long time, like, I started when I was little, but I think a lot of vocalists start when they're little, like, you sit for exercises, they show you the five-finger scales, and I had just
Right.
done it long enough that I sort of picked up my hacks to it, so to speak. And I think a lot of it came because I had a good theory background, and I had a good music teachers along the way, but I had basically found my way around the piano in a way that it supported my singer. I always said I was a vocalist who played piano, but not a piano player. And
Right.
what was funny about it is I think because I had that attitude, I had a lot of students coming in who were asking me for piano lessons. Not not voice lessons, but they were like, "I don't want to go to a serious piano like, I'm losing the love for it. Like, I do just wanna sit down at the piano and know enough chords where I can sing along, and I do just wanna improvise, and I want to,
Mhm.
like, sort of have the hacks to just immediately start playing." And I had posted little tips and tricks about it because a lot of my vocal students were asking, and at first I was really resistant to the idea. I was like, "I'm not a piano teacher. I'm not gonna, I can't do that." But then the more I thought about it, I was like, "Well, why not? I'm really just giving people a way into something that I love to do. Why wouldn't you get someone started on an instrument?" And then I'm I take pride in when my students get to a point where I'm like, I think you actually might need someone who has a piano first approach." I feel like I take a lot of pride in saying, "You know what? Now it's time to go seek out a mentor. Now it's time to go find someone who can do more than I can on air." But I'm so happy that we got you started on that. And we started a whole playlist series on it. We have a whole website up now, and it's become like a point of pride for me to say,
Wow.
I'm a vocalist who plays piano, and I've started a lot of vocal students on that. And I've even started some piano students who were just like looking to rekindle the love of it. So I think I can relate to you on that level.
Keeping that fire burning, that passion and the interest alive, especially in the beginning stages when you're learning, is so important. And oftentimes we forget that as professional musicians, the way we process music is different from a beginner. And it's
Sure.
important to keep that interest alive. And it's not to say that they can't take piano up to a higher level,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
They can if they later on realize that they are very interested in doing so and they want to take it to greater heights. That's totally fine. But I think it's important to get the vocalist or pianist or anyone just doing the thing. And I think that's so exciting when it's
Yeah.
done right.
And I know we come from different backgrounds in that you're very much self-taught. And I always say I have a man-made, coach-made voice. I give a lot of credit to my teachers who have formulated my path. But you knew enough music that you could teach voice, even though you were a piano player. And I think that's a good point to highlight there. Like, I can teach piano because I know music. You can teach voice because you know music. And of course, the other instrument knowledge helps, but I almost think there's like a subcategory of like, I'm not just a vocalist, I'm a musician. I'm not just a pianist, I'm a musician. Would you agree with that?
I I would. And a lot of it is about part of being a powerful musician is trusting our ear.
Right.
And I think a lot of pianists, it's a common thing for pianists to fall into because you have the keys provided to you. You hit the key, there's a certain pitch that comes out, hopefully, and it makes it easier for the pianist, but also harder because it's it's harder for the pianist to really tune in and listen
Mm,
to their phrasing. For example, a lot of the phrasing which translates beautifully well into singing,
mm.
and it's a lot of it's a perspective that I wish more pianists had to make their playing sing. And so then when they do sing in a real sense, it really translates so well.
Yeah, totally. So if I could ask you one practical practice question there, if someone were to come to you and now you're teaching piano as well, um, privately, what do you say to them when they are like, I just want to figure out how to connect the dots?
I often like to do a thing where I take them off of the music that they're looking at and I'll tell them, what does that feel like?
Hmm.
And then what does that sound like? Like I ask them because I want them to remember it, not just in terms of the technicality of what they're doing, but in terms of what it feels like to achieve that specific, how it feels like to play an octave, how it feels like to add an octave and a third in there, how it feels like to play a certain arpeggio, right? How your wrist feels when you do a slight rotation, when you're trying to get that stretch. All these little things, I try and get the player to feel more cognizant of their whole body so that when they do it again, it's more hopefully I can say this right, replicable,
Yeah.
that they can do it over and over again and they can lean into that feeling. And
Hmm.
then realizing that, oh, I just did this whole technical thing that would have felt so much more dry or overwhelming or may have been less motivated to grasp if I were to just learn it as the theoretical side of things. So, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of know it's cliche, but I do like the saying it's theory, not fact. I think that one sort of resonates with me.
Yes. Yeah.
What would you tell someone? So, as we were talking about, I teach a lot of vocalists who are looking to primarily accompany themselves on piano. So, the goal being singing, but to learn piano to elevate that. What would you tell them to focus on?
Depends on their goal, right? But I would make sure that they focus on recognizing the bass notes. I feel like oftentimes when I make students or even singers like just play, they often will focus on every single note of the chord, every single note of the scale, and I'll be like, find the bass note first. You can sing and just pluck a single bass note and be able to accompany yourself technically, and you just build from there. And then worry about the third, worry about the fifth, worry about the chord tone, and all of those other nitty gritty, more theoretical things. That's I like to strip it down to the very basics. I like to tell a singer, especially if they're looking at a chord chart for the first time, um, to look at the chord symbol
Mm,
and the chord symbol for the letter and for the note on the piano, like to not be afraid to just pluck that note and give you that foundation.
mhm.
That's something that I try and tell not just vocalists, but my piano students as well when they're first learning any piece, especially contemporary. But yeah, hope that answers the question.
Let me just create space for a second. What didn't I ask? And what do you think is important to share in this platform? Is there anything that I missed that you would just want to put out in the world?
Well, I'm always happy to talk a little bit more about like my past doing like biology and how that connects to stuff now, how
Please?
that connects to my musical background. Happy to talk about that. How that, yeah, how all that all connects. I think that's mostly the other thing that I was thinking of. I think we touched on a lot in a short amount of time. Yeah.
Yes, we did. Let's go there. So I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I love the anatomy side. I think music as an art form is very important, but I tell people that I fell in love with music for music's sake first, and then I stayed in the music game because I discovered the world of anatomy and pedagogy and got really nerdy about it. And Harrison and I have had some great nerd out conversations about biology and anatomy. So please take us there, Harrison. What should we know?
Um, well, I always try and tell folks, even if we don't get into details, right? Like that the way we approach science and the way we approach music, all of that is a lot more interconnected than we think. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about like the research that I did. I did spinal cord injury research, I did stem cell research. And so I was very much, my life was all about the scientific method and running experiments and coming up with hypotheses and testing them out. And that really translated into the way I practice and the way I realize that any result is a result and to that there's something to gain from whatever that comes out of it. And a lot of people tend to focus on the negatives. When I asked my students, what do you think went well, or what do you think went easier than expected or harder than expected? And they will almost never tell me what went well. They will always talk about what went badly. And I'm like, in a scientific experiment, this kind of result is tells you something that's like it's like gold. It tells you such a clear message, and you'll know a little bit more about what to do next, or what to try next time, or what not to do next time. And so um, I like to tell, whether from friends to interviewers to conversations like this, that the way we approach research and the way we learn about science is very much also into the way we learn music. And that might be something that people want to argue about, but from my lived experience, it's definitely tried and true, at least for me. But yeah.
You're not going to get any argument from me. I don't know if you can see in the background there, but this was the initial merch design here. I'll bring it over that we had for this.
Oh, please.
We have since sort of left this, what would you call it, tagline? Because we've grown from just me to other people and other things came to the forefront. But this was our original merch. And it says, music is muscular. And
I love that.
that is exactly what you just said. Because music is like in our bones, so to speak, as human beings. But it's also something that you work at. It's also a hypothesis that you try to prove over and over again. And so that was me sort of expressing that interconnection between the science part of it and the art form of it. Same thing with our teacher training course now. Our tagline is teach like artists, because to me, there's always this like interconnection between the foundational structured frameworks and the art.
Yeah, it's like showing folks how music theory works, but also how it can be broken sometimes, and that's part of the beauty of it. So, anyway,
yeah, we could go on this tangent forever.
We could go on forever.
of the pod. I always ask one final question of all our guests, and that is, if you were to leave us with one practical thing to think about as we go into our day, what would that be?
I would tell people to trust their gut and trust their ear, because oftentimes, as we go through life and life is lifing, a lot of our experiences may feel very different or non-traditional or perhaps even isolating, depending on where you are in your specific part of the journey. But to have faith that you have this sixth sense and to lean into what you feel is right for your body. And everyone learns differently, everyone has different life experiences, but at some point, many of us carry the same emotions, we have the same feelings. And so it's important to have to remember and keep that in mind because a lot of what comes naturally to you is what we end up burying later in life, but it actually is what contributes to our greatest strengths and feeds into our greatest passions.
So well said. And Harrison, where can we reach out to you if we want to nerd out just a little bit more, have deeper conversations on this?
Well, you can always reach out to me at Harrison Piano on Instagram. I'm also on TikTok. I'm currently growing my TikTok page because I hadn't been on it for the past few years. Also the same username. And you can also reach me for any other inquiries at harrison at stjohns-jp.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I always have so much fun just chatting about life, piano, and music with you. And I know that this will be a great lesson for all our watchers and listeners out there.
Thank you so much, Arabella, for taking the time to have a chat with me. This was absolutely wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Harrison. All right. See everyone next time. Subscribe to our channel. We'll send out those alerts about our next episode to come. We're really excited to send more of these chats your way. And thanks so much for your support as always.